The penthouse air was sterile, smelling of expensive cologne and old secrets. Park Min-tae loosened his tie, the dragon tattoo on his neck pulsing as he walked past the reinforced steel doors. He expected the usual tomb-like silence. Suddenly, a sharp, rhythmic burst of dialect pierced the hallway. Aigu halmoni, stop acting like a spoiled princess. If you don't eat this soup, you'll be too weak to scold your grandson when he walks in. Min-tae froze as he rounded the corner. It wasn't a nurse. It was Ariana, the quiet black maid in a teal uniform, leaning over the table, speaking rapidly. Madame Sun-hee laughed. Min-tae stopped in the doorway. The luxury penthouse's marble foyer might as well have been a morgue. Park Min-tae, the most feared trillionaire in Seoul's underworld, stood frozen as he watched his grandmother, the woman who hadn't spoken in a year, stop mid-breath. All because of her. All because of Ariana. The black maid everyone overlooked, everyone ignored, everyone dismissed. A woman who should never have known the Saturi dialect of Busan's docks, a language buried with the Park family's past. They thought Ariana was nothing. They thought she was invisible. A trillionaire mafia boss rendered completely powerless by a few well-placed words. They were wrong. The gleaming gold and cold steel of the Park Empire couldn't hide what these men truly were, killers and kings of the street. Min-tae hadn't built his trillion-dollar shadow kingdom on kindness. He built it on blood and the weight of his dragon-tattooed neck. Now his grandmother, the true heartbeat of the clan, was fading away, leaving a void heavy enough to crush steel. Hello, friends. Welcome back. Before we continue, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support keeps these stories alive. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from. Now, let's dive in. Ariana Cole knew the weight of heavy things. At 25, she'd spent a lifetime being underestimated. Too black for the village she grew up in, too foreign for the Seoul elite. A woman caught between worlds, belonging fully to neither. Her agency had given strict instructions: be invisible, be silent, be nothing. Just another dark face in a teal service uniform. Don't make eye contact. Speak only when spoken to. The irony wasn't lost on her. These were the same rules for survival she'd learned on the docks of Busan as a child. But as Min-tae adjusted his heavy gold chain, prepared for another day of silence, Ariana did the one thing she was forbidden to do. She spoke. And in that moment, the most dangerous man in Korea realized he didn't own the woman in his hallway. She owned the only part of him that was still human. The marble floors of the Park estate gleamed like frozen water, reflecting nothing but emptiness. Ariana moved through the penthouse at 6 a.m. sharp, her footsteps practiced into silence, her presence calibrated to disappear. She'd learned quickly. In Min-tae's world, visibility meant vulnerability. She started in the kitchen, preparing the green tea that no one would drink. Madame Sun-hee hadn't touched a cup in months, but Ariana set it on the lacquered tray anyway, arranging the porcelain with museum-quality precision. The routine was a prayer to a god who'd stopped listening. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul sprawled below like a circuit board, alive, electric, indifferent. Ariana pressed her palm against the cold glass, watching early-morning commuters flood the streets 40 stories down. They belonged to the city. She belonged to this gilded cage, dusting artifacts she couldn't name in a language she'd been hired specifically not to speak. The other staff avoided her. Mrs. Kang, the head housekeeper, had made it clear on day one. You're here because you're foreign. You don't understand our ways, so you can't gossip about them. The cook never met her eyes. The security detail looked through her like she was made of air. Loneliness, Ariana had discovered, wasn't about being alone. It was about being surrounded by people who'd agreed you didn't exist. She moved to Madame Sunhee's wing, the air growing heavier with each step. The grandmother's suite smelled of unused perfume and medical supplies. The old woman sat by her window in the same silk hanbok she'd worn yesterday, staring at nothing with eyes that had given up on miracles. "Good morning, ma'am," Ariana whispered in English, setting down fresh linens. No response. There never was. But Ariana had started doing something dangerous. When she was certain she was alone, when the cameras in the hallway showed Mrs. Kang 3 floors down, and Min-tae's convoy was miles away terrorizing some debtor, she would speak, soft, in Saturi, the Gyeongsang-do dialect her foster mother had taught her during those brief, golden years in Busan, before the family moved back to America, and Ariana learned what it meant to be rootless. "Halmoni, the sky is clear today. You should see the mountains." Madame Sunhee's fingers would twitch. Nothing more. But it was something. Ariana finished her rounds by noon. The guest rooms that never hosted guests, the dining table set for meals no one ate together, the library filled with books in a language Min-tae had traded for violence and English business deals. She returned to her small room off the kitchen, ate rice and kimchi alone, and prepared for the evening shift. This was her life, a shadow in a house of shadows, invisible by design, lonely by necessity. She didn't know that tonight Min-tae would come home early. She didn't know her silence was about to shatter like all that perfect, gleaming marble. Min-tae didn't sit. He stood behind his desk like a judge at an execution, arms crossed, the dragon on his neck seeming to coil tighter with each passing second. Ariana had been summoned at midnight, pulled from sleep by a security guard who wouldn't meet her eyes. She stood in the center of his office, hands clasped, her heart a war drum against her ribs. The room smelled of leather and expensive whiskey. Everything here was designed to make you feel small. "Where did you learn it?" His voice was surgical, cold, each word a scalpel. Ariana's mouth went dry. She'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times in her head, but none of those versions had Min-tae looking at her like she was a threat he hadn't accounted for. "Learn what, sir?" His jaw tightened. "Don't play stupid. My grandmother laughed today. She spoke today. Because of you. Because you used dialect that died in this house before I inherited it." He leaned forward, palms flat on the mahogany. "So I'll ask again. Where did you learn it?" The truth felt dangerous, but lies felt fatal. "Busan," she said quietly. "I was raised there, ages 7 to 13. His eyes narrowed. "You're American." "I was born in Georgia. My mother died when I was 6. I went into foster care." The words came out mechanical, a story she'd told so many times it had lost its edges. "The family who took me in, the Kims, they were Korean American, retired. They moved back to Busan for Mr. Kim's health, and they brought me with them." Min-tae circled the desk slowly, a predator calculating angles. "And they just taught you Saturi? Old dialect? The kind my grandmother speaks?" "Mrs. Kim was from Gyeongsang-do. She said English would get me nowhere in the village, so she taught me to survive." Ariana's voice steadied, memory warming the fear. "I went to local school, helped her sell fish at the market. The ajumas there didn't have patience for stumbling Korean. You spoke their way or you got ignored." 6 years. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jawline. "You lived there 6 years, then what?" "They sent me back to the States. Mr. Kim passed, and Mrs. Kim couldn't afford to keep me. The old ache surfaced, the one she'd buried under layers of professional detachment. I aged out of foster care at 18, worked 3 jobs to put myself through community college. When I saw the listing for this position, live-in maid, Korean household, I thought—" She stopped. Saying it out loud felt too raw. "What did you think?" His tone had shifted, still sharp but no longer cutting. I thought maybe I could feel like I belonged somewhere again. The silence stretched. Min-tae studied her face like he was reading a contract for loopholes, searching for the lie, but Ariana had none left to give. Finally, he spoke. My grandmother wants you at dinner tomorrow night. Not serving, sitting. Ariana's breath caught. Sir, The contract just changed, Miss Cole. Adjust accordingly. The dining room had never felt so vast. Ariana sat 3 seats down from Madame Sun-hee, her spine rigid, acutely aware of Mrs. Kang's venomous stare from the doorway. The head housekeeper stood like a sentinel, her knuckles white against the silver serving tray she gripped with unnecessary force. Min-tae sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable as he cut into his galbi with surgical precision. He hadn't looked at Ariana once since she'd entered, wearing the same teal uniform she always wore, because she owned nothing else appropriate for this theater of power. Madame Sun-hee set down her spoon with a delicate clink. Ariana ya, the informal address made Mrs. Kang inhale sharply. Tell me about the sea in Busan. I haven't been in 40 years. Ariana's throat tightened. The grandmother had spoken more words in that single sentence than she had in months. She could feel Min-tae's attention shift, a predator's focus locking onto prey. It was loud, Halmoni, Ariana replied softly in Saturi, her voice finding its footing in the old rhythms. The ajumas at Jagalchi Market would shout over each other, competing for customers. Mrs. Kim said if you couldn't yell louder than the waves, you'd starve. The ghost of a smile touched Sun-hee's lips. That sounds like the Busan I remember, all fire and salt. You're from there originally? Grew up in a fishing village outside the city before I married into all this. Sun-hee gestured vaguely at the crystal chandelier, the imported artwork, the cold elegance. Before I forgot what real soup tasted like. Min-tae's fork paused mid-air. His grandmother hadn't mentioned her childhood in years. The soup here is too refined, too afraid to have flavor. Tomorrow, Ariana will make me hemul tongue, the kind that burns your tongue and clears your sinuses. Mrs. Kang finally spoke, her Korean crisp and formal. Madam, with respect, the kitchen staff are perfectly capable. I didn't ask the kitchen staff. Sun-hee's tone could have frozen oceans. I asked my companion. The word landed like a grenade. Companion, not maid, not help. Ariana saw the exact moment the household hierarchy shattered. Mrs. Kang's face went white, then red. The security guard by the door shifted uncomfortably. Even Min-tae seemed taken aback, though he recovered quickly, dabbing his mouth with his napkin as if nothing seismic had just occurred. Over the next week, it became routine. Madame Sun-hee requested Ariana's presence at breakfast, then lunch, then for afternoon tea in the library where they spoke only in dialect, the old woman's depression cracking like ice under spring sun. She shared stories of her youth, her arranged marriage, her fears that the park legacy had become all gold and no soul. The other staff stopped speaking to Ariana entirely. She'd catch them whispering in corners, their eyes following her with naked resentment. Mrs. Kang forgot to include her in the meal schedule. The cook served her portions half the size of everyone else's. But Madame Sun-hee had claimed her. And in the Park household, the matriarch's shadow was the safest place to stand, even if it made you a target for everyone else. The dress box arrived at her door without ceremony. Black lacquered wood, tied with silk ribbon the color of midnight. No card, no explanation, just the box and the implications it carried. Ariana opened it on her narrow bed, her hands trembling slightly as she lifted the lid. The gown unfurled like liquid shadow, black silk with subtle gold embroidery that caught the light like whispered secrets. It was the kind of dress that cost more than she'd earned in a year, the kind that erased the word maid from your identity entirely. Min-tae's voice came from her doorway, making her jump. She hadn't heard him approach, a skill that made him terrifying. Tomorrow night, family function at the Sheila Hotel. He leaned against the frame, hands in his pockets, the picture of casual menace in his tailored suit. Grandmother insists you attend, as her guest. Ariana carefully refolded the tissue paper, buying time. I'm not family, Mr. Park. No, he agreed, but you're the only person she trusts, which makes you something more complicated than family. He stepped into the room, a violation of the invisible boundaries they'd maintained. The dress fits? I haven't tried it on. It will fit. I'm thorough. His eyes traveled over her with the same calculating precision he probably used when assessing business deals. Not lecherous, clinical. There will be people there who smile with venom in their teeth. Rivals, allies who'd become rivals for the right price, politicians who owe favors they're looking to escape. Ariana met his gaze. You want me to spy? I want you to observe. He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket, setting it on her dresser. Grandmother will introduce you as her companion. They'll see the black woman in the expensive dress and assume your decoration, exotic novelty. They'll talk around you like your furniture. The word stung, because she'd worked so hard to be furniture. Now he was asking her to weaponize it. What am I looking for? Anything that feels wrong. You've spent months watching this household's micro-expressions, learning who's loyal and who's looking for exits. He tapped the velvet box. Earrings, they're wired. Anything you hear that concerns you, I'll hear too. She should refuse. This was dangerous, pulling her deeper into a world where people disappeared for knowing too much. But Madame Sun Hee's laughter echoed in her memory, the first genuine joy Ariana had inspired in anyone since Mrs. Kim died. The other staff already hate me, she said quietly. This will make it worse. The other staff are replaceable. Min-tae's voice was granite. You're not. Not anymore. He turned to leave, pausing at the threshold. Wear your hair natural. The gold will look better against it. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command wrapped in aesthetic preference. After he left, Ariana opened the velvet box. The earrings were delicate gold drops, beautiful enough to be harmless. She held one up to the light, seeing her reflection fractured in its surface, half shadow, half gold. Neither maid nor family, something more complicated than both. The Sheila Hotel's private banquet room smelled of money and menace. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across tables laden with delicacies no one would eat. The food was theater, a backdrop for the real business conducted in lowered voices and meaningful silences. Ariana sat beside Madame Sun Hee, the black dress transforming her into something she barely recognized. Men in tailored suits appraised her with dismissive glances before returning to their conversations. Just as Min-tae predicted, decoration. She was learning their faces, cataloging allegiances, when the delegation from Busan arrived. Boss Choi entered like a storm system, broad-shouldered, his suit straining against muscle earned through violence rather than gyms. His entourage flanked him with practiced menace, but it was Choi himself who commanded the room's attention. He clasped Min-tae's hand with theatrical warmth. Park Min-tae, too long, brother. Souls made you soft, all this imported wine and pretty things. His eyes slid to Ariana, lingering with casual contempt before dismissing her entirely. They settled at the main table. Madame Sun Hee squeezed Ariana's hand once, a silent warning or encouragement, she couldn't tell which. The negotiations began in polished Seoul Korean, all formal particles and corporate euphemisms. Territory, shipping routes, percentages. Min-tae's face was a mask of calculated interest, giving nothing away. Then Choi's lieutenant leaned in, whispering to his boss in thick Busan Soturi. Ariana's pulse quickened. They thought they had a private language. Boss, the warehouse on Pier 7. We'll give them that and keep the profitable Pier 3 operation. These sole bastards won't know the difference. They've never seen a dock in their lives." Choi nodded almost imperceptibly, then addressed Min-tae in formal Korean. "The Pier 7 warehouse is our most valuable asset in that sector. We're offering it as a gesture of good faith." Ariana felt the lie like a physical weight. Pier 7 was a decoy, a rusted shell they'd used to cheat Min-tae out of the real prize. She caught Min-tae's eyes. He had been watching her, reading her face like a telegraph. She leaned toward Madame Sun-hee, speaking in Saturi, just loud enough. "Halmoni, these Busan men remind me of the fish sellers who'd show you the good mackerel on top and hide the rotten ones underneath." The table went silent. Choi's head snapped toward her, his face draining of color. She'd just told him, and everyone in earshot, that she understood every word. Min-tae's smile was surgical. "My grandmother's companion spent 6 years in Busan. Funny thing about Pier 7, Boss Choi. I had it inspected last week. Condemned building, rat infestation. Strange thing to call your most valuable asset." Choi's jaw worked soundlessly. His lieutenant had gone pale. "Shall we discuss Pier 3 instead? The actually profitable one? With honest terms this time?" Under the table, Ariana's hands shook, but above it, she lifted her wineglass with perfect composure, meeting Choi's furious glare with the same invisible Maid placidity she'd perfected months ago. Only now, her invisibility was a weapon. The gunshots shattered the night like breaking glass. Ariana hit the penthouse floor before her mind caught up to her body, Min-tae's hand ironclad around her wrist as he dragged her behind the marble kitchen island. The security alarm shrieked. Bullets punched through the reinforced windows, spiderwebbing the glass that was supposed to be bulletproof. "Stay down," Min-tae growled, his gun already drawn. When had he pulled it? His body a shield between her and the chaos. It lasted 90 seconds, an eternity and an instant. Then silence, broken only by shouted commands as Min-tae's security team swarmed the building. The shooters had fled. Amateurs, someone reported. Choi's retaliation for the humiliation at the Sheila. The all-clear came. Min-tae didn't move. Ariana felt his heartbeat against her shoulder blade, rapid, human, betraying the ice calm of his expression. His hand still gripped her wrist, tight enough to bruise. "Mr. Park," she whispered. "They're gone." He released her like she'd burned him, standing abruptly and holstering his weapon. "Your room, now. Don't come out until I clear you." But an hour later, he was the one at her door. She opened it to find him still in his bullet-grazed suit, a crystal tumbler of whiskey in one hand, the dragon on his neck stark against his pale skin. He looked, not weak, never that, but stripped of the armor he wore like a second skeleton. "May I?" he asked, and the courtesy felt alien in his mouth. She stepped aside. He entered her small room, this space he'd probably never seen, with its single bed and the photo of Mrs. Kim on the nightstand, and sat heavily on her mattress. "You didn't scream," he said finally. "Would it have helped?" A ghost of a smile. "No." He took a long drink. "Grandmother is asking for you. I told her you were asleep. She doesn't need to know about this. She'll find out. Not the details, not how close." He stopped, jaw tightening. "I put the target on your back. I could die tonight because I brought you into my world, because I needed your ears at that table." Ariana sat beside him, maintaining careful distance. "You didn't pull the trigger. I put the target on your back." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw something crack in those calculating eyes. "My father used to say everyone close to a park either becomes a weapon or a casualty. I thought I could make you the first without risking the second. Maybe I chose to be a weapon. Did you? Or did I take a lonely woman who just wanted to belong somewhere and turn her into a tool?" The honesty cut deeper than any bullet. Ariana reached out slowly, covering his hand with hers. His skin was cold despite the whiskey's warmth. "I wasn't wrong about you," he continued, quieter now. "At the Sheila, you were perfect. But perfect tools still break, Ariana. And I—" The words caught in his throat. "You what?" "I don't want you to break." Outside, Sol glittered indifferently. Inside this small room, the Mafia boss and the maid sat in the dark, two people pretending they weren't equally terrified of what came next. The tea was wrong. Ariana noticed it the moment she entered Madame Sun-hee's suite that morning. The jasmine scent was too sweet, cloying it away the grandmother's preferred blend never was. The cup sat on the lacquered tray, steam curling like a question mark. "Halmoni, did you drink any of this?" Ariana kept her voice light, casual, even as her pulse began to hammer. Madame Sun-hee looked up from her embroidery, confused. "No, child, I was waiting for you. We always take tea together now." Ariana's hand hovered over the cup. She'd watched the kitchen staff prepare the grandmother's tea 100 times. This wasn't routine. The color was slightly off, the surface tension different. Mrs. Kim had taught her to notice these things at the Busan market, the tells that separated fresh fish from poisoned bait. She lifted the cup, pretending to smell it, her mind racing. "I'll make fresh. This has gone cold." The moment she left the suite, she ran. Min-tae was in his office, reviewing shipping manifests with two of his lieutenants. He looked up, irritation flashing across his face at the interruption, until he saw her expression. "Out," he commanded. The men vanished. Ariana set the teacup on his desk with trembling hands. "Someone prepared this for your grandmother, not the usual blend. I think—" She couldn't say it. Saying it made it real. Min-tae's face went absolutely still, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. He pressed a button on his desk. "Lock down the building. No one leaves. No one." The penthouse transformed within minutes. Steel shutters rolled down over the windows with mechanical precision, sealing them in. Security flooded the hallways. Min-tae had the tea sent to his private lab for analysis, results promised within the hour. They waited in his office, Ariana, Min-tae, and Madame Sun-hee, who had been brought in under armed escort. The old woman sat with frightening composure, her hands folded in her lap. "How did you know?" she asked Ariana in Saturi. "The smell, the color. It wasn't your tea." Min-tae paced like a caged tiger, his phone pressed to his ear as he issued commands in clipped Korean. Find the mole, check the kitchen logs, review security footage. His controlled fury made the air pressure feel wrong. The lab results came back. Oleander extract. Enough to stop a heart within hours, untraceable if you didn't know to look for it. Min-tae's hand crushed the paper. Who prepared grandmother's tea this morning? The answer came through his earpiece. His face went pale, then flooded with rage. Mrs. Kang. The head housekeeper, the woman who'd served the Park family for 15 years, who'd resented Ariana from the first day, who'd been in Choi's pocket, they discovered later, for the past 6 months, her loyalty purchased with promises of revenge against the girl who'd stolen her position at the matriarch's side. The penthouse had become a trap, and the predator had been living among them all along, wearing a housekeeper's uniform and nursing a grudge sharp enough to kill. Min-tae's voice was glacial. Find her, now. The explosion came from the East Wing, a diversion, Min-tae's security chief reported through crackling radio static. Mrs. Kang hadn't acted alone. Choi's men were in the building, using the chaos to breach the lower floors. Min-tae grabbed Ariana's shoulders, his grip urgent. "There's a service exit through the old staff quarters, takes you to the parking garage, then to the street." He pressed a key card and a phone into her palm. "Get grandmother out. Don't stop. Don't trust anyone in uniform." "What about you?" "I'm the target they want. You're the one they'll overlook." His eyes burned into hers. "That's your advantage. Use it." Madame Sun Hee stood with remarkable calm for a woman whose home had become a war zone. She'd already changed into simple clothes, dark slacks, a modest blouse, the silk hanbok abandoned. "Ready, child?" Ariane nodded, her mind already calculating. She stripped off the designer cardigan Min Tae had bought her, revealing the plain teal shirt underneath, her maid's uniform, worn out of habit. She pulled her hair into a simple bun, transformation in reverse, from companion back to invisible help. They moved through the service corridors, the sounds of shouting and breaking glass growing distant. The route was narrow, utilitarian, the parts of the penthouse designed for people who didn't matter. Ariana had walked these halls 1,000 times. Now they were a lifeline. The parking garage was chaos. Residents fleeing, cars jamming the exits, security trying to maintain order while coordinating the response upstairs. No one looked twice at the black woman in teal leading an elderly Korean lady by the elbow. Just staff, evacuating a resident. Ordinary, forgettable. The street was worse. News crews were already assembling, drawn by reports of gunfire at the park building, police cordons forming. Ariana pulled Madame Sun Hee away from the crowd, into the maze of side streets she'd explored during her rare days off. "Where are we going?" the grandmother asked, her breathing labored but steady. "Somewhere they won't think to look." 20 minutes later, they stood in front of a tiny jjimjilbang in Dongdaemun, a neighborhood bathhouse, the kind frequented by ajumas and working women, utterly beneath the notice of the criminal underworld. Ariana paid the entrance fee with cash, keeping her head down. Inside, the steam and chatter provided perfect camouflage. They rented a sleeping mat in the communal rest area, surrounded by dozens of ordinary people watching television, eating ramyun, living lives untouched by mafia politics. Madame Sun Hee lay on the heated floor, her hand finding Ariana's. "You saved my life twice today." The tea was luck. "No," the old woman's grip tightened. "You saw what everyone else missed because you've spent your whole life being the one people overlook. My grandson gave you an expensive dress and called you a weapon, but this," she gestured at the bathhouse, "their anonymity, their safety, this is your real power." Ariana's phone buzzed. Min Tae's message was brief. "Status? Secure. Hidden. She's safe. Good. Stay invisible. I'm coming for you both." Around them, the bathhouse hummed with ordinary life. 2 women draped in anonymity like armor, waiting for the storm to pass. Min Tae arrived at dawn, alone. He found them in the bathhouse rest area, Ariana awake and watchful, while Madame Sun Hee slept fitfully on the heated floor. He looked different. Still dangerous, but something had shifted. His suit was rumpled, a cut above his eyebrow hastily bandaged. The gold chain was gone. He looked almost human. "Almione," he whispered, kneeling beside his grandmother. The formal distance he usually maintained had evaporated entirely. Sun Hee's eyes fluttered open. "Foolish boy, you should have sent your men." "I needed to see for myself." His voice cracked on the last word. He looked at Ariana then, and she saw something in his expression that made her chest tighten. "Mrs. Kang is in custody. Choi's men are dead or arrested. The building is secure." "And Choi?" Ariana asked. "His organization is being dismantled as we speak. He made a mistake targeting my family." Min Tae stood, offering his hand to his grandmother. "But he made a bigger mistake underestimating the woman who saved you." They returned to the penthouse in the gray morning light. The windows were being replaced, bullet holes plastered over, evidence of violence methodically erased. But the house felt different, lighter somehow, as if the betrayal had purged something toxic from its foundations. Min Tae called a meeting for that evening, not in his office, but in the formal dining room. The entire household assembled, security, kitchen staff, the remaining administrators. They lined the walls, uncertain and wary. At the head of the table sat 3 chairs. Min-tae took one. Madame Sun-hee took another. The third was for Ariana. Some of you have questioned Miss Cole's place in this household, Min-tae began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You saw her as an outsider, foreign, temporary. His eyes swept the room. You were wrong. He gestured to Ariana. She identified poison meant for my grandmother when our own staff prepared it. She led Halmione to safety when trained security failed. She uses skills you dismissed to protect what matters most to this family. He paused. From this moment forward, Ariana Cole is not household staff. She is family counsel. She speaks with my grandmother's voice and mine. Shocked silence. Ariana felt the weight of every eye in the room. Madame Sun-hee reached across the table, taking Ariana's hand. This girl understands something my grandson is only beginning to learn, she said in Saturi, then switched to Korean so everyone could understand. True power isn't in gold chains or feared names. It's in knowing when to be seen and when to disappear, when to speak and when to listen, when to be a shadow and when to be a shield. Min-tae leaned forward, his gaze locked on Ariana. I offered you a dress and called it armor, but you showed me that your real strength was always there, in the places I'd trained myself not to look. That night, Ariana returned to her small room to find it transformed. Her belongings had been moved to a suite on the family wing. On the bed lay a new wardrobe, elegant clothes in every color but teal. The maid's uniform was gone. In its place, belonging. Thank you for staying with this story from beginning to end. If it moved you, please subscribe so you don't miss what's next. We share stories about love that defies logic, about choosing each other against impossible odds, and about the moments that change everything. Drop a comment. Tell us your city, your takeaway, or what this story meant to you. We read every one. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next.